and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? In the months leading up to a big milestone birthday, I decided it was time to stop sidelining my dreams and realize that I'm the hero of my own journey. I knew I didn't want to do it alone, so I created this podcast to learn from other moms on their own quest, so their words of wisdom and lessons learned could help light the way for mine. I created this podcast for myself. Come along with me, and you'll find some treasures of your own. Hello, and welcome to this episode number 20 and the first in season 2 of the Mother's Quest podcast. If you were following along with season 1, you know I took a short break so I could be fully present and then recover from my son Ryan's bar mitzvah. The whole experience was truly transformative for Ryan and filled me with some of the best moments of my life. Seeing him come into his own, share his truth, and celebrating with all the people closest to us. I realized that in many ways, Ryan and I were both on this epic journey during season 1. And there were so many things that happened for him that I'm certain wouldn't have been possible in the same way without me being on my own mother's quest. If you want to hear more about the impact of this experience on Ryan, tune into episode number 18, which he and I recorded together, and number 19, which includes a full circle story at the end of that episode. One quick update I want to share is to give you a sense of what to expect this season. There will be more amazing conversations with a diverse group of mothers, and even the first father on the podcast in honor of Father's Day. In order to make some space for me to launch the coaching and reflection circles I've been talking about and grow the Mother's Quest community, I decided to release a new episode every other week instead of every week this season. On the alternate weeks, there'll be a Facebook Live either by me or from one of my podcast guests in the Facebook group, starting with this episode's guest, creative entrepreneur Kathleen Shannon. So be sure to join the private Facebook group if you want to be part of those conversations, and there'll be a link to that group in the show notes. Every now and then, I will also record a solo cast or another Epic Milestones episode, and those will come to you as a surprise. Before my conversation with Kathleen, here's Erin Kendall with this week's dedication.
Hey guys, Erin Kendall here. I dedicate this episode to my mom, Deb, who unknowingly had raised me to be a hardworking feminist. These qualities that have helped shape to be who I am today. Mothering isn't easy, but she did it with poise and grace, even after experiencing a less than perfect childhood. Which, by the way, I would have never known by the way she raised us kids. I remember when I would head off to school or work and she would always say, bye, try to have a good day. Sometimes when a perfect life isn't handed to you on a silver platter, you need to try and have a good day. And that was always okay with me. Her resilience and grit continue to teach me that you can always try to have a good day no matter what. Thank you, Julie, for the honor of dedicating this episode and sharing your journey so we can all be inspired to live our best epic mom life that we can. We learn so much by listening and sharing. It's really what's helped me get through motherhood.
Thanks, Erin, for that appreciation and for sharing about your mother and how she raised you to become a hardworking feminist. Our guest today, Kathleen Shannon, embodies the qualities of a hardworking feminist. She also has this incredible generosity and openness, and she's impacted so many women, including myself, by sharing her experiences as a mother and an entrepreneur. Kathleen is the co-founder of Braid Creative and Consulting and the co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Being Boss podcast for creative entrepreneurs. Through her work at Braid Creative and Being Boss, she's helped thousands of creative entrepreneurs from all over the world authentically brand and position themselves as creative experts, cultivate confidence in their business, and blend more of who they are into the work that they do. When she's not podcasting, writing a book, or shaping her next newsletter, She's hanging with her husband Jeremy and their toddler Fox. In this episode, Kathleen reflects on the impact her mother's total adoration and acceptance had on her, giving her the freedom to be herself, along with the secure foundation to be creative and to explore. We talk about the challenges of motherhood, the profound experience of her home birth, the sleep deprivation she experienced in her first year, and the tough decisions she's had to make to build her businesses and be fully present for her son. We also talk about how she's learned to ask for help. Her fiercely independent attitude made it difficult for her to get support from her network at first. But learning to lean on her support network allows her to make a passionate and purposeful impact beyond her family, and in turn allowed her son to expand and learn to love from other people and experience opportunities that she alone couldn't provide him. Kathleen also shares how she invests in herself by prioritizing her health, creating white space, and owning her schedule. And she gives us 2 challenges. The first, to reach out to someone and ask them to care for your child. And the second, to spend some time with our calendars, designing our ideal week and noticing the gap between the ideal and the real. I left the conversation enriched by the spectrum between surrender and control, security and freedom, and a sense of excitement for redesigning my own time to allow for the full range of both. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. So Kathleen, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. You are my first guest in season 2. And I have been so excited to have you on because you've really been a guiding light for me since I started on my entrepreneurial journey about a year ago.
Thanks, Julie, for having me. And what an honor to hear you say that. That means so much. Thanks. Thanks for inviting me on your show. It's so cool to be guest number 1 of season 2. And you had a great first season. Congrats on that.
Thank you, Kathleen. It really has been an amazing experience. And I have a Facebook group, and I was reflecting on it this morning, that having you on the podcast is one of those moments where I realize how far I've come. Because a year ago, all of these thoughts were really just a dream. And I found your podcast and just devoured it. I was grateful there were so many episodes that I could move through, and each one helped me in different ways. And then a year later, to actually be holding space to have a conversation with you is really incredible. When I posted that, another member of my group responded immediately with how excited she was to hear that an interview with you would be coming out, and that she really wanted me to thank you for you sharing your motherhood story and your entrepreneurial journey, and how both of those things were really instrumental for her.
That's so cool. I feel like motherhood has been a huge shift in my identity, and it has absolutely impacted my business. And I don't quite have the space to talk about it on my own podcast necessarily, or even on my own blog. So I love coming onto platforms like yours where I can really dig into the conversation. So thank you for having me. I'm excited about the opportunity to get to talk about this a little bit more.
Fantastic. So let's get started. I begin every podcast episode with a question to learn a little bit more about your life and what shaped you. So tell me a little bit about your childhood, and particularly the impact that your mother had on you.
Probably my earliest memory ever of being alive is my mom changing my diaper. And I remember peeking through my legs and seeing her face and just her smiling at me with total adoration and love. And that pretty much sums it up. I feel like she's been cleaning up my mess and smiling at me with love ever since.
But amazing that you remember that.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, it's one of my earliest memories. But growing up, both of my parents have always had kind of traditional government jobs, working for the state, pensions, 401ks, super duper stable, and just kind of pretty typical. But what was interesting with that is that me and my siblings, so I'm the youngest of 3. I have an older sister who I own Braid Creative with.
I feel like I know her as well.
Yeah. And then our brother, his name is Donnie, and he's a sideshow performer who travels the world doing that. And so the three of us are incredibly creative. And one of the questions that we get often is, what are your parents like? In fact, someone just emailed me asking to interview my parents on a podcast, which I thought was really fun. But the truth is that the amount of security they gave us really set us up to be creative and wild. And we were total latchkey kids growing up. And so we had a lot of freedom. Like if I could describe it as anything, there was a lot of freedom within the context of a lot of security. So I've had some friends who have grown up with a lot of freedom, but not with that safety net that we had. And I really think that safety net is what allowed us to thrive in a really creative way. So, growing up, another thought about my mom and how she shaped who I was growing up is whenever I was in elementary school, I specifically remember asking her if we could go to Goodwill for my back to school shopping. And I was having this moment of crisis, like of internal conflict as we were headed there. Like, gosh, why can't I just be like all the other kids and want to shop at the, JCPenney or just at the regular stores? Why do I have to want to shop at Goodwill? So it was almost like I was this little 8-year-old playing the victim that I wanted to shop at Goodwill. Anyway, so we go to Goodwill and I purchased the smallest military flight suit that I could find. So it's like this Air Force pilot flight suit onesie. And I wore it to school like on a Tuesday. And my mom was so cool about it. She was like, Kathleen, you have permission. You can wear whatever you want. You can wear the Guess jeans if that's what you want to wear, or you can wear this flight suit. It's up to you.
Wow.
She goes, I don't think you want to be like all the other kids. Like, this is my gut. And she was right, of course. So really just, giving me the freedom to be who I was and to explore who that was and never really pushing me in one way or the other.
That's amazing, because absolutely one of the things that I appreciate so much about you is how you are. You seem so 100% authentically you, with your own style and your own perspectives and opinions. It comes out in every way, from the way you dress to how you, hold the space in the Being Boss Facebook group. And what has your mom thought about you as you've been charting your path and expressing who you are?
I feel like it's just so normal that there's really nothing to say about it. It's just, I can show up to family dinner with a head full of dreadlocks one day, and then 3 years later, I can have a shaved head, and she's not even batting an eye. So I think that, the other day she was like, so will you let me know if you're ever on Oprah? And I was like, yes, Mom, I'll let you know. But for the most part, my family is just, I don't know, I guess there's not a lot of commentary on what we're doing. It's just, in some ways, I feel like my family, I spend every Saturday with my family, my mom and dad and my husband and our kid, and then my sister and her family. My brother's in town right now too. So we're all together on Saturdays just doing jigsaw puzzles. We're playing Settlers of Catan. It's almost a reprieve from talking about ourselves, because that's what we're all three of us are doing that all week long.
You can just be.
We can just be. And so that's the space to just be. It's almost nice that my mom couldn't really care less about who I am on the internet,
Absolutely. Well, I want to start to move into how your experience of having a mom that was so accepting and created that stability, but also the freedom, how that has begun to translate into how you approach motherhood. So before I ask you a question about how you engage with your child, I want to also just tell you a little bit about the EPIC framework that has become a foundation for Mother's Quest. So
I would love to hear more.
When I decided a little over a year ago that I was going to follow this dream that had been brewing for a while and create Mother's Quest, I was trying to articulate for people what was it that I wanted to have in my own life and that I wanted to help create for other mothers. And It really is that I want to live what I call my epic life. And I know that you followed the hero's journey as well. And it was following that concept, but from a little bit more of a feminine perspective of really seeing my life as a journey and a story that I'm the author of, where I feel like I filled it with the things that matter most to me and I didn't have regrets. And I also felt like while being a mom, there were particular guideposts that I felt like would give me that life while still allowing me to have motherhood be a priority. So epic, connotes this idea of becoming the hero of my journey, but then also it's an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think will help me to live that life while I'm raising my children. So E stands for engaged, and that's about being engaged mindfully with my children. P is passionate and purposeful, and that's about making a difference that's beyond my family. I is invested in myself, and C is connected to a strong support network so that I'm in community on my journey. I think one of the ways that my version of the hero's journey differs than the traditional one is that I don't want to have to sacrifice myself or be on the brink of imminent danger. I really want to be connected and have this network of support around me as I'm going through the process. So the podcast actually has become one of the ways that I've done that by reaching out to people like you and learning your life experience.
I love all that. I feel like I could just start digging in right now to the contrast of being a creative and then also being connected and how that causes so much conflict.
Ooh, okay. Well, I look forward to hear when we get to those guys.
We'll get to see. Yeah, when we get to see, I'll talk more about that.
So let's start with E, about being engaged mindfully with your children. Tell me a little bit about your motherhood journey and how your experience as a child has influenced in some ways how you want to show up for your son.
Yeah, this is a really good question. My mom basically was born to be a mom, and probably even more than she was born to be a mom, she was born to be a grandma. She is the best grandma ever. But she also didn't have a career like I do. She wasn't an entrepreneur. And my sister, for example, is the breadwinner at her family. And my mom wasn't necessarily. I mean, both my parents worked growing up, but it's a little different. And even just with the accessibility of the internet, mothering is different now than it was for my mom's generation. And so when my son was born, I put an unfair expectation on myself to be my own mom because she's been so amazing and just stable and unwavering and committed to the service that it takes to be a mom. However, I am not my mom. I am a creative entrepreneur and an artist and an adventurer. I mean, my parents have never even been out of the country. They don't own a passport. Wow. And my husband and I, one of our most epic journeys was trekking to Mount Everest Base Camp. And I learned so much about myself in that process. So when I was pregnant with Fox, I was kind of thinking about what kind of mom I wanted to be. And I started avoiding the question by really just focusing on labor and delivery. And maybe that's completely normal for first-time pregnant moms. But I really started obsessing over that. And I ended up having a home birth. And I remember meditating a lot on Fox and hoping that he was doing okay inside my body and, meditating on what it would be like to breastfeed him. And we had a completely uneventful home birth, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I mean, it was one of the most amazing, enlightening moments of my life, for sure. What was
so amazing about that?
Oh, wow. So I don't know. I've never done any drugs like LSD, or I could only imagine it's what people talk about whenever they talk about, seeing God, probably. After he was born, I felt so connected to him, yes, but more to myself, like my connection to the whole world. And it's hard to even articulate or put into words, but I try and remember that feeling often, that feeling of just loving the whole world and feeling like the whole world loved me and just creating something, and just even the physical aspect. Again, I've never run a marathon, but I can only imagine that's probably about what it feels like.
The physical exhaustion.
Yeah, the physical exhaustion. So, I mean, I guess people who've run marathons don't have their vaginas basically ripped in half at the end of it. So there's also that added aspect to it. But it was the coolest thing I've ever done. And we need a different word for pain whenever talking about childbirth, because like, yes, it wasn't the most pleasant experience in the whole world, but it was incredible. And I would do it over again every day if I could. So Loved it. So if any of you listening haven't had a child yet and are anxious about birthing a baby, it might be the coolest shit you ever do. And whatever your story is, it's your story, however the outcome is. Okay, so anyway, that was kind of like my first moment of really engaging mindfully with Fox, was in how I wanted the birth experience to be. And I know a lot of people told me along the way, well, doesn't always turn out the way you want it to. And I felt like they were squashing my preferences. And it kind of killed my soul a little bit to have people be like, well, you never know. Well, just you wait. Something terrible is going to happen. You're all going to die. You know, like I felt like those were the messages that I was getting. And it really discouraged me. And I felt like, you know, even just talking about this now, I'm just starting to realize what an impact that probably had on our first year. Of then just feeling like I didn't know what I was, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I had a lot of anxiety around keeping a baby alive. And anytime he cried, it really worried me. So we ended up doing the whole co-sleeping, breastfeeding on demand. I don't think he was in a stroller for his first year. I wore him everywhere. And so there was a lot of that, what I now know is called attachment parenting philosophy, into what I was doing. And it was just kind of a natural way of being. But I was also incredibly sleep deprived. I was waking up probably 8 to 12 times a night for a solid year. It was pretty bad. And he still doesn't sleep through the night, but I'm past those issues. But I felt really engaged with him that first year. And I did have to make some tough decisions. So even as attachment parenting, as I'm coming off, like I was growing and building 2 businesses, and he was in daycare full time. And so that was a very engaged decision that I made. And it's one that I'm really proud of. And that's a whole other topic that we could probably get into or not get into with daycare. But I feel like probably just every decision I make with him is incredibly mindful. And just now I've released probably some of that control that gave me so much anxiety over the first year. Because now he's a little over 3, and I can see that he's just his own person. And there's so much that I don't have control over. And so really engaging with that lack of control, that surrender. And the word surrender came up for me so much in that first year, but I didn't understand what it meant. Like I didn't know how to actually practice that. So I just went off on a huge, motherhood is so complex. And, you know, before we got on the show, I was talking about how it's sometimes so hard to articulate the complexities that go into motherhood. And so I feel like I'm trailing all over the place.
You're doing a great job. And actually, I was listening to one of your really earlier episodes on the podcast where you and Emily were talking about motherhood, being boss and being a mom. And I think you were I think Fox was maybe a year old. And so you're probably just coming out of the massive sleep deprivation and this phase that you've been talking about. But I was really curious, so how old is Fox now?
So he is 3. And in fact, whenever we recorded that podcast, it was probably the height of it. Like that's whenever things deep in it.
Yeah.
And so at a year, whenever I realized I'm never going to sleep again, people have accused me of being flippant whenever I say this, but it's actually incredibly true. And I went to the doctor, was I wanted to die. I was so tired. And yeah, I could still record an awesome podcast and sound together. But I was really, really struggling with the sleep deprivation. And I did get some professional help on a couple of different levels for that, for the sleep deprivation. But we're now coming out of it. He only wakes up once a night now.
That's huge. Well,
and I'm able to fall back asleep. So I'm not having the same kind of insomnia that I was. So
Sleep deprivation is no joke. And I've talked to so many other moms who've had a similar experience where they really at some point needed to realize that they couldn't figure it out themselves and it was okay to ask for help. And it made all the difference in the world.
Totally.
I'll make sure that I do link to that episode though, because you talk about your decision about putting Fox in daycare. And there's a lot of gems that you and Emily both share that folks might want to listen to. So I guess the question I had, though, I was curious as I was listening. So this is 2 years later. What do you feel like is the biggest thing that is different about your motherhood journey now?
You know, I think that we just connect with our kids probably best at different ages. So even thinking about my relationship with my own parents and how that's constantly evolving and changing. And I think it's easy to think at some point that this is how it will be forever. You know, this is how my child will be forever. This is how I will be forever. But we're living, breathing organisms, emotional people that are constantly changing. And so I don't know if it's about where I'm at or if it's about where he's at or if we're meeting in a really good place right now or if we're getting a little bit more sleep. But I think I've finally been able to see that nothing is permanent and that everything changes. But I had to see it for myself. Like I had to see us get through that first year and even through that second year to really, you know how everyone tells you to enjoy every moment?
Yeah.
I'm just now at 3 at that wanting to enjoy every moment phase. Like I'm wanting to just soak it up like a sponge. I'm just wanting to freeze time in certain moments. Even I'm able to cope with the hissy fits a little bit better. And I have noticed if I do get less sleep, I am unable to cope as well. So I think with the sleep thing too, is that intellectually I knew how I should be, but I just couldn't be the person I wanted to be with very little sleep. I had a really hard time coping with the hissy fits or even just the crying, or even whenever he would get sick, I would get really triggered. Like, why is this baby always sick? You know, and just that kind of lack of control. And again, surrendering to that lack of control that you have has been a huge learning curve. And I just had to learn by doing. I'm sure that there's like a learning modality for learning by doing, and I'm that person.
Yes, I think a lot of us learn best that way. So we're going to move on to the next guidepost in a moment. But before we leave this, I'm wondering, I like to talk about epic snapshot moments, those moments where you realize, this is what I've been wanting. This is what I seek. What's a recent moment that you've really been wanting to bottle up and enjoy about Fox?
Wow. I mean, just this morning, we were getting ready for school and the day and work and all those things. And we were laying on the couch together and he was watching a show on the TV. And he's a super cuddly baby. And I still call him a baby, even though he's 3. He's going to be my only one, I'm sure. So I stretched out my arms and he cuddled up on my lap and we were kind of belly to belly for a solid 10 minutes. And I was just feeling him breathe and I was just huffing his head. And it was so good. I just love my little cuddly baby so much. And if I could just bottle that up forever, I would.
So sweet. Yeah. And what I love about that is like you were just like totally present. Sounds like not thinking about anything else.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I think that there's this, whenever I first heard your question of how do you engage mindfully with your children, I kind of thought, man, I don't know. I'm on my phone a lot. He's on his iPad a lot. There's a lot of screen time over here. Yeah, and so I started to think like, maybe I don't engage mindfully with my kid. Maybe I should be better at that. And I think that's one of those mom things that's easy to dive into. Like I should. But it's those little moments, even if it's literally just 10 minutes a day, that I think feed everyone. And I don't think that those moments could be happening all the time, all day, every day. So I recognize them when they happen and I'm super present for them whenever they're there. Or I'm even thinking about yesterday, I was driving him home. I went and picked him up from the nanny and I was driving him home and I was looking in my rearview mirror and I could see his little hand tapping the door. And even just the way his little hand was tapping the door, like these little vignettes of moments just slay me. They're so good. And I feel so much love in those moments.
There's something that you just said that I want to name for myself that I've been realizing. And I think this is true even more as your kids get older. So I have a 4.5-year-old son, but I also have a 13-year-old son who just had his bar mitzvah, which was an incredible experience. But what I've noticed is that being a great mom doesn't require me to be mindfully engaged all the time. But what I've been so really proud of is that I can tell the moments that really matter. And this definitely happens again as they start to get older. If my older son comes home and there's something happening for him, or in the few minutes as we're carpooling to school and he's about to start his day, if I can tell that I need to just really show up right now and be curious and or acknowledge him or give him the space to talk about what's happening, that's what really counts, I think. It's not like being that way every minute of the day, but putting aside and quieting your thoughts so that you can be fully present with your kids when they really need you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, with Instagram and the internet the way that it is, and even as coaches and podcasters, people who are probably obsessed with meaning and finding meaning in things. It's easy to want to find meaning in every single moment. But talking back to the gift that my mom gave me was just letting moments be, like letting me watch TV and eat some Cheetos out of a cup. And that's all it is. So, but then, recognizing those moments that have meaning. And so whenever my mom told me that I had permission to wear whatever I wanted and that it was my choice, that was a moment that stuck with me my whole life. And so I think what would be really cool is if Fox and I can both acknowledge and recognize those moments at the same time. Not that that will always happen, but I like to think that this morning, whenever we were cuddling, that even on a soul level, he knew that that was really special.
Yeah, he was taking it all in too. Thank you for being so open. I'm definitely having some aha moments myself. So Kathleen, the next guidepost, he is passionate and purposeful, and that's about making an impact beyond your family. So what are the ways these days that you think about the impact that you're making?
I mean, certainly deciding to be a working mom plays into the impact that I'm making. The work that I do over at Being Boss is incredibly important to me. Expressing who I am as a business person and growing businesses and making an impact for creative entrepreneurs all over the world is the greatest gift I can receive, honestly, to be able to build that platform and community and hopefully a movement of people who are choosing to work and live on their own terms. That's the impact I want to make. And all I can do is show up by example.
What's a recent example where you feel like that impact was reflected back to you, or you realized I'm really making the difference I want to make?
That's a good question. I feel like so often I'm just blinders on, nose to the grindstone working, that sometimes it's hard to look up and see how far that impact has come or grown. So, just even before I got on the call with you, I was talking to one of our clients at Braid Creative and sharing with her. She was telling me how she was kind of freaked out to start a blog or possibly a YouTube channel because she feels like there's a lot of noise out there. And so even just talking her through why her voice needs to be a part of the conversation, that felt like impact. And that was just one-on-one. You don't need a huge following or a big list or the numbers or the metrics to have an impact. And so I think those are those one-on-one conversations are what feel really meaningful to me. Every year we also do a vacation for Being Boss in New Orleans, and seeing 75 bosses get together, and they're not just talking to us, they're talking to each other. And so that always feels like a moment that really sticks out for me as well.
That's something I've really been appreciating as you've been building and expanding Being Boss, are the ways that you've been able to build real connection. And it's something I've been struggling with too. I recently posted that I felt like I had fallen down a rabbit hole in terms of just the online world. And all of a sudden I was like popping back up and looking around and feeling like, whoa, what am I so focused on? And these things are meaningful. And I need to create more space for like one-on-one live connection, whether it's in person or it's even doing more video calls. But I felt like I was losing some of that. How have you found your way through that tension with an online business?
It's a dance and it's a blend. And I love having an online business and I love the accessibility and reach that being online gives me and even the impact online. But whenever it comes down to it, there is this energy that happens between people that is magical in real conversation and in real time and I almost said real life, but like the conversation we're having right now is real life. But whenever you're sitting around a table with your friends and the kinds of conversation, or even just those silent moments, they have a lot of weight to them. And so I really just try and, the dreaded word balance, I really just try and balance it out. I try and give myself a lot of white space and I try and schedule a lot of in-person meetings. And even being boss, it shapes the kind of products we create. So whenever we decided to create the Being Boss Clubhouse, we thought, okay, we could create another online course and we're really good at that. But how can we bring the vibe that we created in New Orleans to this product? And it shaped the kind of platform that we chose to host our calls on. And it shaped actually how we deliver. So it wasn't just about sending someone a Dropbox link. It was about getting on a Zoom call with them and being face to face, and also allowing other people to see each other, because it's not just about us connecting with our clients. It's about them connecting with each other. So that's how it's really impacted the work that we've done, is just trying to blend those online and offline vibes and bringing it all together.
This is really helpful. This is exactly what I am grappling with now and need to learn. So appreciative to shine some light on that. You're naturally creating some curiosity for me about the next guidepost, which is I invested in yourself. And you mentioned already creating white space. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you do that and the impact of that. And then the other ways that you're really focused on investing in yourself and caring for yourself.
Yeah, so it's really easy. I just go to my calendar and I block off a day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. with busy. So that's how I literally keep my calendar from getting scheduled with appointments, is that anyone on my team can see that I'm busy or unavailable. So literally scheduling it out is how I do it. And there's no magic to it. It's just, and then the second part of that though is committing to that time and not booking out your calendar and saying, well, I gave myself this white space, but I could book over this. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. It does happen. But then you've broken your promise to yourself and your brain now knows that that space is negotiable. So my non-negotiable is actually my workout time every morning. And that's the thing that I do every single time, unless I'm sick, of course. But I treat it like a really important meeting with myself. And investing, I mean, it's a lot of time to invest in myself. My work day doesn't start until 10 a.m., which between the time that Fox goes to preschool or with his nanny and 10 a.m., I could be getting so much work done. But I'm investing in myself. I'm investing in my health by hitting the gym. And that's just the time and space that I give myself. White space is a little bit different from working out, though. White space, I allow myself to do anything in that space. So it might just be not having a day of meetings and I can work all day long on a book or on, just tying up some loose ends on my to-do list. So that's how that works. And that's how I invest in myself. Yeah.
Have you always been able to commit, or are there some things that have helped you get to this place where you follow through on these things that really make a difference?
I mean, probably being the product of being a youngest child is that my motto has always been do what you want. And I think that if people just got a little bit more selfish with their time, they would find it a lot easier to say no to certain things. And so I've always been pretty good about committing to doing what I say I'm going to do. But one really helpful tool for me has been using a scheduling tool. So I use Acuity scheduling, and I linked it up with this is like not very sexy. Like this is very tactical, but I linked it up with my Google Calendar. And so I kind of live and die by my Google Calendar. And then deciding, okay, when would my interview times be? When am I recording the podcast? When am I available for lunch meetings? And really kind of mapping out what an ideal week would look like. And then setting my availability in my calendar accordingly. And so then I just send people my link, and I don't have to decide or negotiate whether or not I'm willing to take a meeting over my workout time or over my white space time. It's just automatically linked up, and Acuity becomes my gatekeeper. So that's been pretty cool.
Ooh, I definitely need to do this. I've started using my Google Calendar more, but I've really been feeling like a missing piece for me is being more structured about my days and my time, and really doing what you just described about sitting with like, what would be ideal? Like, how do I really want to design my days and my weeks? And it's reminding me actually of a great tool you have, which we could create a link to, of designing your ideal day. You know,
yeah. So the ideal day, I love applying it though. So ideal day is pretty simple. You just think of your ideal day and what that would be and taking little steps to get there. And totally, I'll send you a link that you can include in the show notes. But I love the idea of mapping out an ideal week in Google. And so time blocking out minute by minute exactly what you want to go down. You can even color code it if you wanted it for different projects or mom time or workout time or work time. And then you have those blank spaces available. And then it's just about filling up those spaces accordingly and making sure that some of that space is nothing space that can't be booked over, but that is just for you.
So helpful. Before we move off of this guidepost, I also have a curiosity around, were there moments in your life where you really felt like you had to consciously step up and like live a more epic life? Or do you feel like you've been just sort of following a thread of this your whole life?
Yeah, I feel like I need to step up every day. This is my problem. I feel like every day needs to be epic. I almost heard that as, has there ever been a moment when you felt like you needed to step back?
Interesting.
Which is also every day. So that's my struggle. But no, yeah, I've always had big dreams and big goals. So that's never been a challenge for me.
That's been true your whole life.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Did anything shift for you as you started creating Being Boss? Like, is this at a whole different level, or does it just feel like a natural progression of where you've been headed?
It feels like a natural progression.
Yeah.
It feels like this is what I was supposed to be doing. And it feels like there's something bigger around the corner, whatever bigger means.
So then let me ask you this question. You asked it yourself. Where do you feel like you need to then pull back or step back?
Oh, I don't.
That doesn't sound very convincing.
I mean, probably just, I do feel a little burnt out, and I can't quite place my finger on where that's happening, or if it's even in that every day waking up wanting to live an epic life. Like maybe I just need to step back on my daily drive and just do the work and trust that it will unfold the way that it's supposed to. But probably stepping back, again, I think it comes back to that control piece. And so I wanted to control how Fox slept. I want to control my own success. I want to control my opportunities. And it just doesn't work that way. So that's probably where I need to step back, is getting a little bit more into that surrender.
Yes, I was just thinking of that word surrender that you used earlier. Bringing that more.
But it's a mixed bag because, well, I know a lot of people who surrender all the time and things don't go the way they want it to go.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's a blend there. There's a little give and take, push and shove.
Well, so the next guidepost, C, is for connected to a strong support network. And at the beginning of our conversation, you said you also had some thoughts about this and how it relates to being a creative entrepreneur. How does this show up for you in your life?
Okay, so I read an amazing article. I will send you a link to it if you want to include it in your show notes, because it articulates this concept much better than I can. And it really named this thing that I was struggling with. But this idea that whenever you're a creative, to be creative, sometimes you're having to dig into really dark or unstable places to create the thing. And whenever you're a mom, all you're wanting to create is stability and comfort. And so I even saw a quote recently that was from Brene Brown saying you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You can't have both. And I'm like, I want both. Because as a mom, like our drive is to create comfort for our child, right? And so as a creative, I want to choose, as a creative and an adventurer, you know, I want to choose courage and I want to see the world and make big things. But those are at odds with each other. And so that was a conflict that I really felt probably a lot in that first year with my son. And just a lot of guilt that comes around, you know, like the built-in patriarchy. And a lot of that is in our bones and in our DNA, even more than I had ever imagined. And becoming a mom really highlighted some of that for me. It's been really tricky balancing courage and comfort. And so I have leaned, coming back to my support network, I have leaned on my support network to give myself the space to be courageous while also creating a comfortable environment for my son. And that support system has been my husband, of course, my father's son, paramount. Like we are truly 50-50 whenever it comes to raising our child together. And I can go on my business trips that I need to go on, and he can call in sick if Fox has a fever because I can't cancel my appointments. So that's been huge. I could not do it without him, and I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. And then my mom, of course, born to be a grandma, she takes Foxy from me every week since he was 1. So again, the day that I was like, I'm going to die, she was like, let Fox spend the night. And I was like, he's waking up, 8 times a night. Like, I don't think he should spend the night. And she was like, it'll be fine. Yeah. And, with some hindsight, I can see like, wow, I should have done that earlier. But she's been huge. I mean, my mom and dad both in taking Fox every week. And then my sister and her kids and her husband, they live across the street from me. And so I do have this amazing support system. Oh, and my nanny, Ashley, like I can't not mention her. Not that she might not ever listen to this show, but having other people, allowing other people to love my son as much as I love him. I mean, I'm convinced that no one could love him as much as I do, but allowing other people to love him and allowing him to love other people who, whenever he's in their care all day, I think it can only expand the love in the world. And it's a good thing. And so she's providing him opportunities that I couldn't. So during the days, I know that you interviewed one of the Women's March founders. Fox went to a march with Ashley. She painted him a little activism, like A is for activism sign, and just stuff like that where I'm like, wow. And she's doing art with him all the time. And she's mindfully engaged with him in ways that I can't be because I'm trying to make that passionate and purposeful impact beyond just my son. So I think the biggest trick for me, though, has been I've been so individual and so fiercely independent that it was really hard to learn how to get support from my network without feeling guilty about it or without feeling like a failure. So that's been really huge. And that might be one of those shifts again, which has made motherhood so much more comfortable for me, even in the last 6 months than it had been in the first year.
That's really powerful. In one of the interviews, I interviewed Sadia Ahmed, and she was talking about the fact that her child had reached out to, I want to say it was maybe his aunt, instead of calling her with an issue. And her first reaction was to feel sad, like, he didn't come to me with this. But then she really quickly realized what could be better, like how great that I have helped build a strong connection that he has with a family member, that he had somebody else that he could call. And she's really started to shift her perspective about what a gift that is to create that for her children. So it sounds like that's what you've been learning along the way too.
Totally. I couldn't agree more.
And
something else that came up that I want to mention here, because it's a story that I haven't shared many places, is that only 2 people brought us food after I had the baby. And one was like an acquaintance of my husband's, or, kind of like they don't hang out very much. It wasn't like his best friend. And then another was a friend of mine. And I don't think it was anyone else's fault but my own that people didn't bring us food, because I didn't ask. Like, I didn't ask for people to bring me food. I think they all thought I had it covered.
And that you like to be independent.
Right. And that I have very strong food preferences. I would have eaten anything after having that baby. So I think that that's just like a lesson learned, where if I want food, I'm going to have to ask. Yeah. And so even just last week, I was going on a business trip, and sometimes I'll have my neighbor come over and babysit Fox, but like after my husband leaves, but before the nanny comes and gets him, or different circumstances, and everyone was booked up or busy. And so I asked my sister, who lives across the street, hey, can Fox come over for an hour? And I felt this moment of imposition, like, man, I'm really imposing on her. I know how hard the mornings are for her, getting her own kids ready for school. Now I'm going to throw a Fox in the mix. And then I thought, wait, it feels good to be needed. And if she asked me if I could watch one of her kids, I would happily do it, no matter how busy I was. Yeah. And so I just reminded myself that sometimes it's a gift to other people to be relied on or to be needed.
Absolutely. And so another thing I talk about a lot in Mother's Quest is how much our children are learning how to live their lives from the example they see of us. And so in you being able to, becoming more comfortable asking for help, you're eventually going to show Fox that it's okay to do that, that's, part of being connected.
Totally.
I'm curious on the professional side, where you have found, community and connection to help you grow your businesses.
Oh, I mean, of course, anyone who listens to the podcast has been instrumental. And then also my sister, who's my business partner, and then Emily over at the podcast, really leaning on the inner circle has been huge. And that's first and foremost. And I know that probably whenever people think about the Being Boss community, they might think about the metrics and the downloads and all the listeners and the huge Facebook group. But for me, it kind of radiates from the inside out. And so leaning on my own team has been huge, and being very much a control freak whenever it comes to how things look and how they're presented, and making sure that the information we're sharing is top notch. It's been really huge to give over some of that control to our team, and to realize that being a good leader is about helping other people become good leaders. And so that's a philosophy I keep in mind from my own team members whenever it comes to the tasks and projects that I'm giving them to our community at large.
So great. It seems like a skill or a talent or a gift of yours is building amazing partnerships. I mean, when I think about what you've done with your sister and what you've created with Emily, do you feel like there's any particular thing that has helped you be so successful with that?
I mean, my sister and I worked together in an advertising agency before we started Braid Creative together. So we already knew that we worked well together beyond just being sisters and best friends for life. And then Emily and I were in the trenches together as well, working on projects together. We shared some clients, and I hired her to help me with my website, and she hired me to help her with branding. And so really not jumping in head first into a project with people that I don't know. I mean, it's just like any other relationship where you're not going to hopefully marry somebody on the first date, right? So partnerships in business are just like any sort of friendships or relationships or partnerships that you have in life.
Yeah.
And really treating it like that has been huge for me. And just remembering that we're all human, and anytime things start to go south is whenever we begin to put the business first and our relationship second. So I think in all cases, putting our relationship first is what makes business thrive.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the interview, and we always end with acknowledgments. But before we do that, I want to ask if there is any particular challenge you want to offer me on my quest that anyone listening may also choose to say yes to?
Oh. I think that the daycare thing came up first and foremost. So my challenge, and this might not be a challenge for you, Julie, but for anyone listening, is to trust your child in somebody else's care and allow that person to love or not love your child. And allow your child to have that experience of loving another person or depending on another person that isn't you or not liking another person. So I think that would be my challenge.
Yeah, I love that. And my husband and I are going away, not this weekend, but the next weekend. And my children are going to go stay with their grandparents. And, there's always that little bit of guilty feeling that you were describing of, not wanting to be in a position and then worrying how will they be when we come back and roll into the week and they haven't seen me. So I'm really going to hold that. It's good timing for me about the gift it is for me to create that space and for my husband and I to have that time. But then also what a gift it is for my kids to have that time to connect with their grandparents. So that's very timely. And then would you also give me a challenge on the work front, possibly related to some of what I shared I've been struggling with around making real connections and or the scheduling white space? What would be your top recommendation for me there?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think that one of the first most actionable things you could do is to get into your Google Calendar and literally map out your ideal week. And so create a new calendar for that and turn it on, and then turn on your existing calendar on top of that and see where are the differences, like where are the disconnects between your ideal. So turn off any of your existing calendars. Yeah, turn off your existing calendars, create a new one that's your ideal week, and then turn on your existing calendar and look at where have you been filling things, space that you don't want to be filling, or where are you not taking up opportunities. For example, let's say in your ideal week, you have a coffee date once a week. Is that happening at all in your existing week? And if that's not happening, since it sounds like that kind of connection is something you crave, if you have a coffee date on your calendar every week, then you need to fill that date with a person. So who are you going to reach out to? So that would be my challenge for you. That might kill two birds with one stone.
Yes. Okay. I definitely accept both challenges. Feel really right for me. So helpful and so smart about turning off the one calendar and then looking to see where's there a mismatch.
Yeah.
Realigning.
And then from there, you can start to automate it by linking it into something like Acuity.
Yes. So that's the next step for me. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a total privilege to talk with you and to hear more about you do share so much. So I feel like I know a lot about you, but I feel like I've learned a lot of new things. Some of the messages that I'm taking away are just the complexity of motherhood and life, which came up in a few different ways for you, both about having the stability that your mother gave you, but then also the freedom and how you're navigating that as a mother and a creative entrepreneur in terms of being able to create comfort for your child, but also being able to pursue the life you want to live and having the courage to pursue your creativity. I love this idea of surrender and coming back to that both in motherhood and in life and in our work. Not stopping to move forward towards the things that you really want, but occasionally noticing when you need to step back a little bit and let go of some of the control. So those are some nuggets I'm going to be taking with me from this conversation.
I love how articulately you wrapped a bow around my ramblings. Thank you for that.
Were not ramblings. It may have felt that way for you, but not for me. What do you feel like has been surfacing for you from this conversation?
Oh, well, I mean, just thank you for creating the opportunity to talk about it. And there is a lot of things that I didn't even realize whenever it comes to the link between motherhood and work and the impact that they have on each other, but how they also shape each other. And so the kind of boss that I want to be is also the kind of mom I want to be. And vice versa. But really just truly, I want to acknowledge you for creating this space where moms can share their stories and recognizing that it is complex and that every mom has a different story. I think this is the trick that we get sucked into, is that there should just be one way. And there are so many ways to parent, and there's so many experiences that we'll all grab onto differently. And so just creating that space for people like myself to share their mom's story is really cool. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome. Well, I hope we'll stay connected. I will be listening and taking so much more wisdom from you and all that you offer in being boss, and look forward to staying connected to your journey as a mom and a creative entrepreneur. Have a great afternoon.
You too, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, head over to mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and help us spread the word. I want to end with some words to light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.